Sawadee krap, everybody. Welcome to Thailand.
I love how you're getting in the spirit.
I have to. Everybody was greeting each other this week. I had to jump in with that.
It came up a lot this
It
week.
did, exactly. I was like, I have to do that on the podcast. I had actually thought about doing that earlier, and I'm like, I really have to do it this week. So finally. Sona, for you, by the way, it's Sawadee Ka. For the man, it is Sawadee krap.
I was wondering why it was varying. Thank you for that explanation.
It's gendered. Yeah, it's gendered. Welcome to Need Some Introduction. Today we'll be discussing The White Lotus, Season 3, Episode 6, an episode called Denials. The Nile's just not a river in Egypt. You know that, Sona?
So I've heard. I'm still hung up on this gendered greeting idea. That just seems really fraught with like the whole ladyboy situation.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess you have to pick a gender in that case. That's a very good point, by the way, with all this gender talk nowadays. In Portuguese, I speak Portuguese. You say thank you as a man, you say obrigado. When you say it as a woman, you say obrigada. So once again, you got to pick a gender when you're talking. The French as well have many gendered verbs and phrases. So, or all Latin languages. So I guess one more complexity there.
Yeah, I think I'm grateful for our gender neutral language.
If you're
Uh,
non-binary, how do you pick a gender in your phraseology? I never thought about that.
yeah, sorry, I couldn't get back on point after that.
You got so digressed.
Yeah, my mind went somewhere else. Yes, Denial, very popular this episode.
Indeed. Although I guess everybody makes their revelations by the end. By the way, my name is Victor. This is Sona.
Hi.
And on this podcast, we go week to week, usually covering, and sometimes we binge something on Netflix occasionally. But in general, we go week to week watching a show along with our audience. We do not get early screeners. We're watching it in real time, just like all of you are, and hopefully being a little bit of a companion for you to explore these topics and have a one-sided conversation, unless you're yelling at us in the car, which happens too, I'm sure. Just a few show notes before we kick things off. We have a YouTube video, which we've been promising for a while. We were discussing the finale of Severance, but many of you maybe don't watch Severance. So worry not, because we are just 2 weeks away from the finale of this show, The White Lotus. And many of you, of course, are listening to one coverage and not the other. Sona and I will have another recap episode on that finale. News to you, perhaps, Sona, but just announcing it now. And we will post that video there as well. And maybe we will continue to do that on these special occasions, maybe a big premiere, a big finale. We will continue to have video versions of these conversations.
I can't wait to find out what I'll be doing.
Recapping the finale of The White Lotus. That for now, that's the only thing on the agenda.
Okay.
Speaking of that, other things that we'll be covering in the near future, we have Your Friends and Neighbors premiering the same week that The White Lotus ends, a new Apple TV Plus series that I think explores this late stage capitalism topic like this White Lotus show. So maybe a good synergy with our audiences. Do check out that trailer if you haven't already seen it. This is John Hamm's first starring role. He's done a lot of television, by the way, since he ended Mad Men. He was just on the most recent season. He was the villain in the most recent season of Fargo, for example. And he's done a lot of comedic roles as well. But this is his first starring role in an ongoing series, which has already been renewed for season 2. I'm very intrigued by this one. Somebody who is living high in the hog. This kind of reminds me of the stories of the Ratcliffes here in this
It sure
particular
does.
show, having his finances collapsing around him. And he decides, you know what? My friends and neighbors, the people around me, are also rich. If I started stealing stuff out of their homes, they wouldn't even notice. He starts to do that, and he starts to become successful and make connections with the underworld, which ties into some of the other shows we'll be covering this year as well. This crime as a possible capitalistic strategy. Most importantly, perhaps, is that as he is breaking into people's homes and stealing their things, he starts to discover that they all have secrets as well. So this show looks like it's going to be fantastic. And the confidence that Apple has in having seen it and renewed it automatically for season 2, I'm very intrigued by this. So definitely something we'll be covering, and just a few weeks away now. So very exciting. Did you finally see the trailer for this song?
I did finally watch the trailer again, and I actually paid more attention to it this time. And yeah, it looks like a super fun show.
And of course, April, as is often the case with us on April, we go through the summer and desperately looking for anything to watch. but Aprils are so packed that we can barely find time to cover it all. And maybe some of this will end up as short videos that I cover, maybe season long recaps, etc., through the YouTube channel, through some other channels as well. Now that I have these other avenues for publishing things, but just a few things. I'll probably have an April preview episode of all the things that are upcoming. Just a few things to shout out. Black Mirror's new season. I did a ranking of all the Black Mirror episodes when the last season came out about a year and a half ago, and that's one of our most popular episodes. So I will be covering this season of Black Mirror. The Last of Us is coming just about 3 weeks now away. The most popular show of the past few years. I think they're up to 70 million viewers on that first season. Huge success for HBO. People love zombies, Sona. They love their zombies.
People do love zombies. I've never loved zombies, but I can't deny that they are a pop culture phenomenon.
I am exhausted by zombies. I used to be a fan of them. Just to speak to the fact that people still love them, the 28 years later preview is the second most popular horror movie trailer of all times. Like hundreds of millions of people have seen the trailer for the new Danny Boyle, Alex Garland movie, which looks fantastic, by the way. And I am a fan of that original film that they did together, which is over 20 years old now, almost 30 years old, 28 years later, apparently, is just fascinating to me that people have not burned out on zombies somehow. I burned out on them quite a while ago. I will definitely go see 28 years later. I'm on board for something that I think is doing something new, but 15 years, how many years are we now into The Walking Dead? And now there's like 4 or 5 different spin-off shows. That fact that people are still watching that is shocking to me. But hey, you know what? To each their own. People love zombies, apparently. And something else we'll be covering before the end of the month, just to shout it out now. Sona, there's a new series coming out called Mobland on Paramount Plus and possibly on Showtime. I'm actually not sure how this release is going. This is from Guy Ritchie. It stars Tom Hardy, Pierce Brosnan, Helen Mirren. It is packed with famous British actors. And very excited for this one as well. And that's premiering just about a week. And one last thing that you may want to check out, Sona, coming out just this very week, and we'll be discussing this, Darren and I, later this week, the new Seth Rogen series called The Studio, which is about this fan, basically a movie fan, who gets this fantasy wish of trying to run a failing movie studio. I love the cast in this series, but I wasn't super on board with covering it. I'm like, well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But Sona, the reviews have been coming in for this show. This is maybe the most well-reviewed show of the past 3 or 4 years. It has like a nearly universal approval. So I'm like, really? This? I was a big fan of Platonic, by the way. So I'm on board with Seth Rogen's, and he does The Boys, which I continue to watch. I'm on board with most of the stuff he produces and even acts in. So I am curious to see it, but I was really shocked to see the incredible positive reaction to this when critics got to see it last week. So anyway, very curious about that, and I'll be giving you my opinion of the first 2 episodes, which are coming out this week.
Nice.
I also finished The Residents, by the way, and so I forwarded you this review. Someone gave this show a 1/2 star review saying, this is like Monk was in the movie Knives Out, to which I say, that is exactly what it feels like. So I am 100% on board for this show.
What more could you ask, honestly?
Exactly. 2 of my favorite things, by the way. If you like that, if you think that Monk in the movie Knives Out sounds like a plus and not a minus, then I would recommend you check out The Residents, which, as is usually the case with these mysteries, I thought the resolution of the mystery wasn't fully satisfying. I mean, it all makes sense. They didn't cheat, right, but it just wasn't like as thrilling as I would have hoped for. But the whole way there, it is very funny. It is very knowing. It makes some very nonpartisan jokes about this is a political set murder mystery. It could have been a little more incisive in attacking both parties. I think it would have been more fun. But they're being very kid gloves with their political attacks, although they make fun of the narcissism of politicians in general. In general, just like the character stuff is so funny. Immediately, they are certain types, and their interactions are very funny. I really did enjoy this. So it could have been a little zanier. They could have gone for like Clue. They could have gone straight up zany. I would have appreciated that. It has this very dry humor, which is very funny. If you like the tone of something like Monk, for example, or Knives Out is another one. That very good corollary, by the way. If that sounds appealing to you, check it out. You'll probably like it. Before I'm going to throw it to you, Sona, and ask you what your general opinions of this episode is, I just want to put one thing out there. I've been complimenting the music of this season of the show. It's as if the music has become its own character and it has been heightening the series from episode to episode. But this particular episode, this building sense of doom, but with this just the a hint of possible redemption in the music itself. The music itself is doing so much of this work, but I'm loving it. I love the tone of this show. My heart was racing multiple times. So much of this was because of this perpetual and building sense of dread in the show. It's I just want to shout it out because it's really extraordinary. I hopefully this guy gets nominated for an award for this, if not a win. So in general, I love the tone of this episode. I have one particular plot line, which we'll get into in greater detail later, that I continue to have issues with. But
Hmm.
in general, Sona, what did you think of this episode?
I loved it. I thought it was great. I think we're really building towards something. I agree there was an impending sense of doom. I don't think I was so cognizant of the music specifically conveying that, but I do think the music helped convey that. I think the plot lines are really developing in an interesting and mostly fun way with, the exception of the one super disturbing one that we'll talk about. Uh, and I do think we're seeing more of the actors' capabilities than we
Mm-hmm.
had
Yeah,
before. Like, I think the acting was really great in this last episode.
yeah, I agree. With all of that, I think all the plot lines are now much more compelling as opposed to the more unevenness of the earlier episodes of the show. And yeah, I mean, I'll just call it out here briefly before we get into it in much more detail later. The Schwarzenegger actor, the Patrick
So
Schwarzenegger,
good.
who I disliked so much, I like didn't even want him on screen earlier in the show, and all of that has been paying off in this, peeling back the onion of how he is being confronted with his own emptiness to a large extent, and of course that this character that we despised this whole entire time, or at least I did, is all designed perfectly. So it's just makes the weight of the revelation of his own apparently lack of introspection until this point is really potent now that he makes this turn. Basically, is really well done.
Yeah, what an interesting arc for this
Mm-hmm.
character,
Yeah.
and what a terrific job he's doing with the acting for it because he conveyed so much. I mean, I almost felt nauseated watching him.
Yes. Let's kick things off pretty much where the show begins. We have Tim Ratliff's suicide fantasy. Sona, I this once again like last week where I'm like, there's no way he's going to shoot himself, but they held that moment for so long. I'm like, is he going to shoot himself? And then I honestly thought for a second, with how long this dream or fantasy sequence played out, they had actually done it, that they were going to be like,
I
oh my
did
God,
too.
here's the shock. And by the way, for a moment, I'm like, wow, what a completely unexpected turn of events. But it really would upend the entire show. And I was kind of excited for it, to be honest, because
And
not,
then I
not
was
that
disappointed he was still alive.
yeah. I mean, I think they did great work with him later in the episode. I just think that for a moment, I was like, wow, this would really,
Yeah, what a bold choice
what
that
an
would be.
incredibly bold choice. Exactly. Yeah. It would really change the show in every possible way. But they did this game again where when the episode begins and you hear the gunshot and she wakes up, I'm like, this is a dream sequence. And then it went on for so long. I'm like, is this happening? they keep
I
they keep doing this to me in the show.
I went on the exact same ride you did because it was also so realistic,
Yes. Right.
right? Sometimes when it's a dream sequence, they add in little details that are quirky or absurd that you think, oh, maybe this isn't really happening. But here it was 100% realistic.
You're absolutely correct. I was just thinking as you were talking about Victoria on the beach when the tsunami's coming, and how, of course, the house is on the beach. All of it is too artificial. So, it's a dream sequence pretty early on, as opposed to this. But of course, it is more realistic because it's not a dream having. He's actually playing out the scenario in his mind realistically. He's like, and then what would happen? And then what would happen? And I'm glad that he makes the realization that it's not like, and then my family will be happy without me. They're like, no, they will be horribly, horribly traumatized. So he at least is factoring that into his decision making.
My husband was watching this with me, and we were talking about super briefly because it was while the show was on, reasons that people end their lives. And one thing that I was saying, because my husband kind of drops in and out of this show, is that it's not that he's really depressed, it's that he's really screwed,
Right.
right? So it's not, I think, someone being driven to end their life because they're suffering from depression and everything is so bleak. It's because his life is about to fall apart and he doesn't know what else to do. So I liked the realism of playing out the effect on his family because part of what he's trying to do, at least I think he's telling himself, is save his family from going through this
Right.
process of like losing everything, which does come up later. So I like that he was playing out that, well, if I did end things, what's going to happen to my family and how disastrous that would be, that experience would be for them.
Yeah, I want to keep talking about this dynamic because I think all those things pay off and play out over the course of the episode. Because later on, the boys are back from the boat trip, so now they're back in the family unit. We will ignore the elephant in the room for now. Lachlan does come with them to go check out the monastery. Victoria wants to go and check things out. What did you think about the dynamic here? Victoria and the way she's chatting up the other monks there. But most importantly is when we see Piper one on one with this guru or lama. I don't actually know what his title is, to be honest. And then, of course, how Tim eventually goes and speak to him as well. So all of this is really fascinating and planting seeds of things that are probably going to pay off relatively soon.
I had previously said that Chelsea is my favorite character on this show, and she's still a favorite, but I think Victoria has surpassed her for me. I am really loving what Parker Posey is doing with this character. I find it super entertaining. I liked her whole experience at the monastery, the way she's wandering around, trying to introduce herself to people, chat people up. She's not getting any
She's upset
traction.
that they don't speak English.
Yeah.
In Thailand, not Taiwan.
Well, there was a reference to China that
Mhm.
he has to be the best monk in China or something. I'm beginning to wonder if she really has ever fully understood where she is. So all of that I loved. I thought Piper's conversation was interesting and very reflective of, to me, kind of her naivety with this
Yes.
whole
Mhm.
situation. Because also, if this is someone so revered, she's speaking to him very casually,
Yeah.
right? Like just popping in almost like this is a therapy session.
Yep.
And I thought he was very gracious and very kind with the whole family, the monk. But the manner to me was kind of strange. So I liked all of that. I thought the conversation with Timothy was so fascinating,
Hmm.
given what Timothy is going through about what happens after death. The response I thought was really beautiful about being a drop of water
Hmm.
and coming back to become one, I thought was really moving and comforting. You know, we had talked about last week, what would you do if your child wanted to do this? And I would say, stay a month. And if you still want to stay after a month, then you can.
Hmm. Yeah.
Victoria's brought it down to a night. She doesn't
One
think
night.
her daughter can even make it a night in this environment. So I love that too.
Yeah, a couple of things. I loved all of this. I thought the dynamic was fantastic. I like the exploration of Buddhism here within the context of the show, especially through Tim's despondency, let's say. The dynamic between Piper and Victoria is really interesting and so true, I think, to how we parent and even how I parent my own daughter, where so many times I'm like, okay, we'll see how long this lasts when she has some new things she wants to try out, whether she wants to play a sport or some new things she wants us to purchase for her. And I'm like, this is going to last a week. And then she does commit to it. So there's so many times that I myself am, I think we all as parents have opinions of what we think our children, how our children are going to react. And I think the show is doing a really interesting thing where I don't know who's right in this moment.
I agree.
I feel like Victoria's being so dismissive that she's saying, you won't even make it a night. You think you're going to make it a year? You're not even going to make it a night because she's looking at how this place doesn't have all the amenities. I see how these people live. She's not going to be able to handle it because she herself, Victoria says later on, that if she can't live in a lap of luxury, life is not worth living, right? Which is so
Right.
anti-Buddhist, by the way, which is very interesting that it is the exact opposite perspective that we see through that conversation Timothy has with the monk. But then you have this interesting dynamic with Piper when I see her walk in, and I work in technology, and I've heard of these stories where you have college hires that are now coming out of Ivy League schools and they get a bad performance review at Google or something. And Google HR folks on these podcasts I listen to will talk about how the children's parents show up at Google headquarters to contradict the performance review. So
Yeah.
it makes you think about this fact that these kids have been so pampered and had their parents do so much for them that basically Piper is not ready for this, right? She goes in there as if she, like you said, to have this conversation like she's talking to the vice principal at her school or something. Can you talk to my parents about this? Can you convince them that I should really be here? It is such an immaturity, and it speaks to the fact of where Piper is, and it also speaks to the fact of Victoria's opinion of her. So I really don't know. Piper may become enlightened or start on that path. Victoria could be 100% correct. But really fascinating for me, I think, is this strange mirroring here, surprisingly, that Timothy is contemplating his own suicide and he gets this reassurance in a way, probably not the right thing for him to be hearing at this moment, and
Right.
probably not the way it's intended from the monk. And there's a beautiful image, I agree, in Buddhism in general. It's a very peaceful understanding of death as part of the cycle of life. It is not a traumatic thing. It is actually a reversion to the norm. And that being that drop of water separated from the ocean is what leads to all of our pain, right? It is being
Mm-hmm.
in your body, having your monkey mind, being obsessed with the physical world. That is what causes our different forms of pain in our lives. And it is meditation and quieting the mind that reconnects you to that other energy, right? I'm not saying I believe in all this stuff. I'm just saying, I'm just explaining kind of what the belief system is. And it's this beautiful idea that it's ego death, right? Once you are no longer the individual, you are part of the collective, you find peace. And then, of course, completely contradictory to that is that Victoria is saying that she wants to die, but for the exact opposite reason, where it's like, if I don't have all the creature comforts, all of them, then life's not worth living anymore. So it's these two diametrically opposed perspectives, but both of them are saying like, in this circumstance, I'd rather be dead, but coming at it from two very, very different ways. So Tim, after his emotional, great performance here by the actor in this episode, after that really emotional reaction to hearing this from the monk, which once again, I don't know what's going on inside his head. And if hearing that the material world is not so important, does it mean that life's worth living even when you don't have material goods? Or does it mean that death would be a comfort? I'm not sure how he's going to take this information.
I wondered too, and then also, given some of the other comments that have been made in other storylines this season, it seemed to me like really the easiest solution is for him to kind of just disappear into Thailand.
Right.
And he's in the perfect place to do that. You kind of can straddle that line of not being dead, but not having to deal with this if you just disappear into Southeast Asia.
Hide and seek, let's say.
There you go.
If I had to guess right now, Piper is not going to be the one who ends up staying at the monastery, but one of the Ratliffs may very well end up there. It
Yeah,
could be
it's
Lachlan.
it's occurred to me that perhaps the whole family should be staying there.
Maybe they all move in.
They all have reasons that it could help them.
Good point. Victoria would have the most trouble with that. Once again, the show is doing this really incredible thing, I think, where it is simultaneously developing these characters and having these really interesting scenes between them throughout the whole entire show. But of course, simultaneously continuing to drop breadcrumbs for a potential the resolution to the shootings we heard in the first episode, right? We heard multiple gunfire, and now here's somebody who could be thinking to himself, maybe what he needs to do is to not only kill himself, but kill his family members. As a matter of fact, he explicitly
Yes.
fantasizes about killing Victoria later. Just a jump ahead to the scenes from next week, we see a similar conversation he has with Saxon, where Saxon says, I am nothing if I'm not successful, putting someone else on his
You've
potential.
got to
Like,
go too now.
how many of these kids do I have to kill before this is over? And that might explain all the
Everybody's
gunshot.
either going to the monastery or they're getting murdered.
Or he's
Their
going to kill them
choice.
on the way there. One or the other. Let's go for another trip in the woods and to kill them all. I mean, that may very well be what we are hearing. I don't actually think that would be kind of quite a spectacular finale to the show, but I do think that they are definitely playing with that here, or Mike
Yeah.
White is playing with that in writing these scenes.
I don't like to think of this as a murder mystery show,
Right, right.
but if we look at the past history, the death that we see in the first, well, I want to be accurate, in these last two seasons, there's been an accidental death of some sort,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And the character that we know the most is the one that has the accidental death.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that other people don't die, right?
True.
Because in season two, there were other
A
deaths as
lot
well.
of deaths.
Right.
Exactly.
So it might not just be a single person dying at the end
Yeah.
of this season. There
Mhm.
could be multiple people.
They could just be upping it. So, like season one, there was one, there was
Yeah.
four, I think, in season two. Maybe there's seven or eight. Who knows? Every season, they just keep upping
Right.
it.
And some of them more intentional, some of them accidental.
There'll be like a boat will sink at some point in the future season, and hundreds of people will die at once. If I have one criticism here of the show in general, and definitely this episode, Piper herself, and maybe she'll have her moment next week or something. But Piper continues to be like a cipher. I know nothing about her. We have the interiority, even of the brothers. We may not like the dynamic that's developing there, but we do
Very
see
upsetting.
there's a lot of interiority there. And of course, we see the struggles of what's going on with Chloe, explaining her decision making in this particular episode, for example. So everybody, even a character like Chloe, and definitely a character like Rick, have all explained their motivations. Piper literally just feels like she's the person who moves the family from one location to the other, and she doesn't have any character traits beyond that. And maybe that, like the Patrick Schwarzenegger, like Saxon, like that character, maybe there is more depth there that we haven't explored yet, or maybe there's an acknowledgement of a lack of depth. That could be the case, but I still feel like she's not well defined at all, especially in this episode.
I agree with that take generally, but I will say here we do see her talking to the monk and saying the things that are important to my family are not the things
Right.
that are important to me. And I feel like there's something more out there. So I think they are starting or trying to sketch that out a little bit more. The things that I wondered when I was watching her are there are so many opportunities to do week-long retreats,
Right.
either in the United States or outside the United States. Has she started with that, or is she just jumping headfirst into this 1 year thing? Because I'm kind of on Victoria's side if all of a
Right.
sudden she's
I agree.
decided she's going to spend a year in this environment. But if I knew she had done a week here, a week there, then I would think more, yes, she does know what she's getting herself
Right.
into. And these are questions that I would like to have the answers to one way or the other.
I agree with all of that. And she could have easily done this, by the way. She could have just told her parents, I'm going to the spa. Can you pay for this? And meanwhile, it's more of a meditative retreat. But I can imagine her being like, we need to be like a year away because maybe she needs to really disconnect. So she has to force herself to put herself into a different context. So I can imagine that as well. And maybe she has. We really don't know.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Maybe she spent spring break in Indonesia
Right.
doing something similar. Like just a throwaway line would be helpful if she did do something like that.
She needs to be more fleshed out. Maybe next week is finally the week where they define her a little bit more. I do appreciate the point you made that she doesn't want these things. I understand that. I just don't know what she does want. We still don't know what that is, right? And maybe she doesn't know, right? I mean, she's a young woman. And then a lot of young people are not really certain of what they want yet. So,
It's also, as we discussed last week, it's so easy to disclaim your interest in all of those things when you have them.
right, exactly. Yeah, she's saying all that from a position of luxury.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move over to Blonde on Blonde on Blonde. I'm doing a Bob Dylan reference there in honor of A Complete Unknown, now available to watch on Disney and Hulu. I wish they were paying me for that, but I'm not getting paid for that. But the three blondes.
Completely superficial tangent. Parker Posey's wardrobe and all of the women's wardrobe in this season, all of it is amazing. And Banana Republic did this White Lotus collection. So I
Mhm.
was interested in it because so many of these outfits are so fantastic. But I think they kind of missed the mark in that I would buy a version of what Parker Posey wears in almost every episode, but none of that really seems to be there. I just want to express my appreciation for whoever did the wardrobe for all of these women, including Piper, even. I love everything.
I think that her outfit is a certain type, but very comfortable, I would say. Probably incredibly expensive, but if it
Oh,
was actually.
Parker Posey, those caftans can be really expensive.
Speaking of which, I wanted to, when we talk about the three ladies here, the three blondes, Leslie Bibb's character, she's been the demure one. She's in these like oversized pajamas, etc. But I did want to shout out, speaking of the outfits here, that I loved her in this bikini here. At one point, you see her legs when she's like backlit. And I was like, she has like Barbie doll proportions on her legs. Her legs look incredible.
Kate's bikini in the pool scene,
Yeah. Mhm.
amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
But back to their dynamic, this
Yes.
is all boiling over. All the things that we mentioned last week, by the way, explicitly said. We're like, well, this is a high school dynamic. It feels like they're in
Hmm.
high school again. This is literally the conversation they have. But I especially liked how you see Jacqueline denying what she's done, making herself the victim of it. Everyone's always judging me. So I
Hmm.
loved her particular dynamic, and just that type of person was really fascinating. And then Kate, of course, trying to smooth things over. So it seems to be this is the pattern in general.
I loved watching all of this. Kate thinks, and I think she really did believe that this is going to be fun gossip. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
takes on a life of its own, and she's kind of like, SOS, I took it too far. I loved Lori's inability to control her annoyance at the whole situation, and she just can't keep it to herself. She has to say something. She can't help herself. And then Jacqueline's just complete, she thinks she's just going to shut it down and that's going to be that. And Lori's not going to let her. I loved all of it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that how the dynamic doesn't work when there's not a bigger audience. Lori is saying, like, well, I'm in the right. And by the way, Kate's the one who told me. And she thinks that somehow she's winning the argument. Kate turns against her, being like, "You weren't supposed to talk about that. I thought we were just having fun, like you mentioned in this discussion." It's basically backfiring on her that she's alienating herself from Kate, and rather than bringing them closer together
Hmm.
against Jacqueline, and then of course Jacqueline honestly probably alienating Kate as well when she tries to say, "Oh, people gossip about me. It's so hurtful. Why do people have to say these things? You know how hard it is for me." When she's saying this to Kate, Kate's the one who's like, "I know what I saw. Like, what are you talking about?"
Exactly.
They are playing out these dynamics, but there's only one person who's the audience, and she's in between. She's literally the one who is the witness. So it is a very difficult for them to try to play them against each other. The dynamic actually breaks down. You don't have the 2-on-1 that we've seen multiple times before. It's always once again always interesting to see the triangle dynamic because it's usually two against one. When you're all just 1-1-1, then it's just like maybe
Right.
it's time for this party to be over, which is probably what's happening. This friendship, they haven't seen each other in many years. They have one more day together, and then they might be like, and we're not going to see each other for quite some
Right.
time after this. And maybe that's all for the best. Okay, next up, I wanted to talk about Belinda. So Belinda gets caught in bed by Zion
Love
when
this.
he arrives. So funny. I like Porn Chai like hiding his face in the pillows.
Loved it.
An important character here in the show, but always kind of in the background. So I do wonder if she's going to be more foregrounded in the next episode or so. What did you think about her reaction to Pornchai saying to her, you talked about wanting to open your own facility. That's a much cheaper thing to do if you decided to do it here in Thailand. Do you think she is wary of him jumping into this potential offering to be in a long-term relationship with her after just one night? Do you think she's excited by the prospect? Do you think she's both nervous? And like, how did you read all this?
I mean, before we get there, I
Yeah.
just want to say what a great relationship between
Yeah,
mother and son
absolutely.
that he just rolls with it,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Like he just laughs it off and says, I think you guys need a minute and shows himself out. I really love that dynamic between them rather than it being some big dramatic, this is so embarrassing. Why would you invite me here if you wanted to be having these flings? I liked how it was just minor bump in the road. As far as the question, Yeah, it was hard to read her reaction. And I think it is a strange thing to do to
Right.
offer, right? After less than a week of knowing somebody and one night together, saying, let's go into business together. I mean, I don't know if maybe this is not unusual in Thailand. I think even if they had not spent the night together, it would be a puzzling invitation based on their short relationship so far. And I felt like her reaction was mirroring that. I don't think she's necessarily thinking it's a terrible idea, but it
Right.
is very early in their relationship with each other to be talking about something like that.
It's also especially strange because we know that she is going to be stationed there for months. So even if he wants to say, you really should stay here after, there's still a few months to find out if you guys are really compatible or not, right? Like,
Right.
slow your roll. It's only been a week, less than a week. So chill, chill. And lastly, one more thing to bring up with Belinda, of course, is that Greg does run into her later and says, I do need to talk to you about something, and you should come to my house. It's the one all the way at the top of the hill, very easy to find.
It's an amazing house.
I don't understand how he is on the grounds because they specifically said that no one can go on the grounds who's not a guest. And then he's there. How is that working out? I mean, I guess it never explained that. Is he just
Huh.
hangs out? Maybe just because he's a local, maybe locals get I don't know, maybe,
Maybe there's some sort of membership to the hotel that you can pay for to use its
maybe.
facilities and stuff, and he
Yeah.
does that. I don't know. This is pure conjecture.
Yeah. It could be like a gated type community where they
Right.
have access to, like, rather than having, well, I guess he has his own pool too, actually. So, I mean, I don't know. But I was going
But
to
it
say, like,
might be something they offer for
yeah.
people that don't.
Yeah, true. Or he just might know somebody inside and he's been around for a while. And he splashes a lot of cash around and they let him in. So it could be unofficial. Who knows?
And
Who knows?
beach access, right? His
Yeah,
house is on the hill.
yeah, true. But of course, this is worrying. And yeah, I loved the relationship between Zion and his mom and how that instead of playing it for like slapstick laughs, it's just like, oh, mom, you couldn't
Right.
wait a day or you couldn't do it a day before. And she's just like, I gotta do what I gotta do. So it's just like that whole thing was, it just felt once again very lived in that she's a single mom and she's been raising him his whole entire life. And he's now an adult, and I'm sure she's seen him at his most embarrassing, and he's seen her at her most embarrassing, right? A mom and a son living alone
Right.
together. That's how it's gonna be. You got to share the space one way or the other. And they seem to have a really wonderful relationship. And you kind of felt that too, like when you saw her when she spoke to him on the phone, and she was so excited to see him. And of course, we love Belinda. We do not want her to be the one who dies at the end of this thing, and that is the thing that has been teased, given the first episode. So hopefully that
Right.
is not the case. Belinda should not be the sacrificial lamb. We'd hope not. As a matter of fact, maybe we bring her back for another season, even since she's already been in multiple seasons. I don't know if you saw this, by the way, in the news, but Jennifer Coolidge is saying she has not seen the end of the season of the show, and she says I want justice for Tanya. She goes, Greg has got to die. So she
Love
wants
it.
Greg to die, and I think everybody wants Greg to die. That would be fan service for sure.
Definitely don't think anyone would be upset if Greg died.
Definitely not. Maybe not even Chloe, depending on what she gets out of it. We'll get to Chloe and Chelsea in just a minute, but one more thing to get out of the way before we get into some of the meteor stuff. But this is also really well done, very suspenseful. Guy Talk retrieving the gun from the Ratliff house. Once again, music doing double duty here, and
Amazing.
you knew that he was going to be able to find the gun, and it's interesting too, by the way, that Timothy doesn't even realize the gun is gone, although he should have been suspicious of it when he saw Guy Talk there, and Guy Talk had confronted him about that before. Maybe he didn't even recognize it. That could just be like,
That's, yeah, that was my take is that these people are so
yes,
self-involved that it hasn't even occurred to them that like the security guy is walking back on the path that seems to only lead to their villa.
true, exactly, right.
So what brought him there?
Because he's fantasizing later about killing himself yet again. And of course, has the gun in the fantasy, but the gun is
Right.
gone. He doesn't even know that that's the case. I love the way the sequence played out, very suspenseful. I like that when he finally thinks, aha, look at the decorative drawers, and he goes right to the correct drawer. I just love that
Crazy.
detail for some reason. I thought it was very cool.
The way it was cut together was very suspenseful
Mm-hmm.
with you knew they were returning. They were going to be there soon. And my husband and I were watching, and I was saying, like, just you two hands open two drawers at a time, that would only take you a second. But he just picked the one and was spot on.
Yeah, it's as if that is like the natural drawer you would reach for,
Yes.
and that's exactly where you put it, just the way Tim did as well.
You said you were kind of convinced he was going to find the gun. I was not convinced he was going to find the gun.
There had been this ticking clock set up that if Guy Talk doesn't get the gun back and meet with his boss to
Right.
go to the gun range,
Right.
and I just felt like he's going to get the gun back before the end of the whole episode. I love this type of scene in general, like this like kind of get out of the room before the people come back, and you don't
Mhm.
know that someone's coming back, and that was really well done. Guy Talk finally reclaims the gun, and he's going to target practice, which is like just in the nick of time. He got there. I thought the gun was missing for a minute. He's like, no, no, I brought it with me. He's like, oh, you shouldn't carry that with you unless we get some training. And they go to the gun range. Made me think about the time we went to the gun range, Sona, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting the gun, getting some practice. He does hit the target with all the bullets, not
Yeah,
dead
he's a good
set.
shot.
He did pretty good for a first time out. And there's this thematically something interesting here where multiple times they're telling him, does he have what it takes to take on this role? This is the one thing I wanted to bring up. His relationship with Mook, where earlier on I was like, is she taunting him because he's not the right type of person to be in a relationship with her, or she doesn't see him that way? But not only does she seem excited about their date, she also seems excited when he mentions that they gave him a gun, which is maybe symbolic there as well, and how this means that they're trusting him with something, he's moving up in the world, and she seems very excited by this information. So maybe my read of this is that she did like him in that way. Earlier, I thought that maybe she never had those type of feelings for him. So maybe she did, but she just felt that whatever he wasn't ambitious enough or he wasn't achieving enough, basically that she has been trying to push him to be more ambitious, maybe as a way to make him more of the person she'd want to date. But she's had that interest there. How'd you read those scenes?
I don't know. The way you're describing her sounds very Lady Macbeth-ish. I'm not sure I read that much into it, but she did seem interested in everything in a way that was different.
Maybe make it sound like she's being more conniving than I meant.
Right, like manipulative. Yeah.
Right. Maybe she has, negged him a little bit to push him to be a little more ambitious because she wants him to be boyfriend material or whatever. Just because of the fact that earlier on she seemed like she wasn't really into the date. And now she seems like, she's practically skipping away after like thinking about their date the next day. So,
Fair point.
and
I'm
it's
just
all
hung.
because they gave him a gun. Maybe.
Well, I was just about to say, I think I'm a little hung up on the fact that Guy Talk thinks he has a killer instinct,
Mm-hmm.
a real lack of self-awareness from what we've seen so far.
That's true. Okay. So let's talk about Chloe and Chelsea. And of course, that'll segue directly into the topic I want to talk about the least, honestly. So, given where the episode started off, I was worried that Chelsea had actually not been faithful to Rick, which she could have made that choice, but I would have felt like it wasn't really the choice she wanted to make. Happy to see that it turns out she actually was faithful to Rick. Chloe, meanwhile, hooked up with both of the brothers. Great.
Turns out, yeah.
And what do you think about not only what Chloe says in this circumstance, but also how she describes her relationship with Greg? I was curious in an earlier episode as to whether they had a real relationship or not. It seemed like that Lisa had been at some point a real relationship, but she's basically saying like, I like this. Look at this. I got a boat. I got all these things. I'm here for the convenience of it, which of course is thematically in the show as well, this idea of materialism and what we surrender for materialism. In this particular case, being with someone who is probably a monster because she gets creature comforts out of it. We talk about these dualities of characters. You have Chelsea, who believes once you've been with your soulmate, then this other type of physical lust is cheap and soulless, specifically. She even mentions later on. And then, of course, versus Chloe, who is still on this ride of being like, I'm willing to sacrifice my soul to a large extent if I get the distractions, if you want to call it that, out of it as well. And the dynamic between the two of them. But she is honest in the end with Greg, even though he's reading between the lines, but she's allowing him to.
First, I just wanted to say, as a tangent, while scrolling on Reddit, I did see a headline that really resonated with me not having to do with anything substantive whatsoever, but having to do with how much Chloe resembles Winona Ryder,
Very good point. Yeah, she really
who I
does.
think is so gorgeous. And I think
Hmm.
Chloe is so gorgeous as well. And I think, especially in this episode, she really, really reminded me of Winona Ryder, who, along with Parker Posey, is one of my favorite actresses
From our generation. Yeah.
from kind of our coming of age time period.
Yeah.
That aside, they're kind of showing us the spectrum of where you can be in relationships. It seemed to me Chloe and Greg slash Gary have this understanding of what their relationship is, and it kind of works for them, even though it's not necessarily anybody's ideal, but it's functional for both of them. Because I felt kind of very stressed out when Chloe and Greg slash Gary were talking in the house, on the phone also, but especially in the house, where he's talking about which one of them did you sleep with? Just tell me. I
Right.
already know that you did it. To me, it felt very stressful, but it also felt like it wasn't the first time they were having this type of conversation.
That's what's weird about it, though. I agree with what you're saying in general. She even says later in that separate conversation, he didn't even seem that mad. Maybe he's into it. Obviously, that is a possible dynamic between
Yes, for sure.
relationships, that there is some voyeuristic element to it. And of course, he's with a younger woman who, a generational divide between them, which may tie into all of this. But at the same time, she says, "Are you into it?" And I think if there was an understanding between them, even if he never admitted it, this type of conversation would have happened before. And she does not seem like that. She seems to be questioning, like, is this what you're into? It may be the dynamic that's playing out there. She even overtly states it later on. But I am curious as to whether she's aware of it, right? Because apparently they've never had that conversation, because she's a little surprised by how he reacts to all of this.
Maybe it was more in my head, trying to fill in the gaps here.
Yeah.
Maybe it was more of a don't ask, don't tell type of
Yeah.
situation where they kind of each did their own thing at times and the other one purposefully looked the other way. Because I think you're making a good point. But then I also think if it was really a monogamous, in love type of relationship, I don't think the conversation would have gone the way it did.
Right. Right.
Right? It would be much more emotional.
I think there's an understanding, an unspoken one, perhaps, that this is, a relationship of convenience. But I think that if this was his kink, let's say, and that he wants her to cuckold him, she would have been aware of it, basically. Because that's another dynamic. You could imagine where
Sure,
she does this and then goes
sure,
back and rubs it in his face. And of course, he
sure,
secretly loves it, is a dynamic that absolutely
sure.
could be there. But she doesn't seem to understand the dynamic at that moment. So that's what's kind
Fair.
of interesting about it. She's curious as to whether that is his kink or not. Maybe that remains to be seen. He has invited him, and of course, that's going to set up, who knows, next week. He has some broader plan for Belinda and for these guys. I wonder if he's trying to orchestrate some kind of disaster. That could be the multiple murders that we've heard, of course. That could be another possible multiple murder situation.
Yeah, it's like he's inviting everybody that he potentially has a problem with to the same place.
Kill them all at once.
Very efficient.
Just line them all up.
So maybe he's just playing it cool because he knows he's going to kill them anyway.
Exactly. He's just like, yeah. So that's the other thing I thought, actually, that he may very well be saying, like, well, play cool so that she plays along, but he's not
Right.
cool with this at all. Yeah, bring him over. It's cool with me.
Yeah, he said bring them over, blah, blah. But why would she do it?
Right.
I would never. I'd be like, haha, that's funny. Yeah. Okay, we'll have people over, no problem. But I would not invite the person that I just cheated on him with.
Even if you're just trying to get on his good side again and be like, there's nothing to hide or whatever. Even if she's just trying to play that out, she could be like, oh, I invited them, but they had
Yeah, they
something
can't
else to
make it.
do. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I mean, he's now inviting his family, so it's going to be a lot of people again, just like the full moon party, even more maybe this time.
Yeah, this was a logistical question I had that I didn't understand. It felt like at the full moon party, at one point there were a lot of people on the boat, and then
Yeah.
at one point there was only the four of them on the boat. Did all those other people find a different way home? What happened?
There's that moment where everybody gets off, including Greg. The girls are like, we want to go party, we want to hang out. They invite the guys along. And then Greg's like, I know exactly what you're planning to do. So, yeah, I think that's what ended up happening, that everybody else basically had other things to do.
I see.
There's actually a moment where they're on the dock and the guys could leave, and the girls are like, "No, come along." And then that's when the whole night plays out. I remember the parents even freak out. They're like saying, "You guys will be alone without your phones," all that whole thing.
Yeah, I thought that they had more people on the boat with them when they
Oh,
ventured
when they headed
out,
out, yeah.
but maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
How did you feel about the whole conversation where Chelsea did not cheat on Rick and sees it as cheating on Rick? We were, to the point you made of the fact that maybe there's some kink to Greg's affection for Chloe, or maybe that's a trap. All those things remain to be seen. Chelsea says something really interesting. We've described the Rick character as being very soulful, even though he is hard on the outside. She, once again, seems to be echoing this sentiment to some extent, saying that if she had hooked up with Saxon, it would have been an empty experience because he has no soul. And this does kind of take him aback.
I love Chelsea. I do. This felt a little bit unnecessarily cruel to someone who's clearly going through something, which we'll talk about in a minute.
In her defense, she doesn't seem to know the details of what happened. She seems kind of shocked by a lot of the revelations.
Yes, true.
Chloe seems to be the one who is toying with him.
That's true, but to tell somebody they're soulless is not a nice thing to say in any context.
Well, we do know that she really does not like him. So I don't think that she's trying to protect his feelings, right?
I guess despite myself, I've developed a fondness towards Saxon that I now feel like he maybe needs to be protected from the evil outside forces of the world. I do think that Chelsea and Rick are sweet together. I think it's nice when they're talking to each other. There's clearly a fondness there. And I liked her whole thing of, no, when you say love you, you have to say, I love
Yeah.
you. You can't
Hmm.
just say love you. I thought
It's
it was
something different.
cute.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
cute.
I thought it was cute.
And once again, this coaching of Rick, it seems like she's continuously trying to get him to come out of his emotional shell. Did you read this article? I think it was the actress. I can't remember if it was the actress who played Chloe or Chelsea. I feel like it was the actress who played Chloe, was talking about the kiss in the previous episode. And I bring it up because it is an interesting parallel between the characters and the actors. Apparently, she was describing how Patrick Schwarzenegger, not the character, the actor himself, was saying like, let's just go for it, the kiss in one scene. If we get it wrong, we're going to have to keep doing it over and over again. So let's just go for it on the first take. And the look on his face where he is like vexed and then kind of grossed out was his honest reaction in the moment.
Uh-huh.
And apparently he himself didn't feel good after the scene. And then the younger actor, the actor who played the younger brother, who was, actually much younger, I think they're at least 7 years apart in age. Apparently, right afterwards, he said to Patrick Schwarzenegger, relax, it's just a kiss. And I thought it was such a funny paralleling between what the
Yeah.
actual characters and the actual actors are experiencing in the scene, just to call out the fact he, once again, is grossed out by the circumstances. Now, of course, when I'm saying this in the context of the show, unlike the scene that they're being played out, these actors, in the context of the show, they are brothers as well. So there's a whole other layer to why he may want to throw up in memory of this.
But the acting there was fantastic, right? Like you
Yes.
felt that vicariously,
Mm-hmm.
that unsettled, nauseous feeling.
When we discussed it last week, we're like, wow, what a great acting job. Maybe not an acting job at all.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we want to say about Chloe and Chelsea specifically in their dynamic before we move over directly to the boys?
I agree with you about what happened, that Chloe obviously was there and
Yeah,
knows everything that happened. Chelsea, the way she was acting during the conversation by the pool, it felt like, oh, she and Chloe must have spoken about this because she just went along with everything Chloe was saying. Like, yes, you did do that, didn't you? But then in retrospect, it felt like maybe she was learning it for the first time and absorbing it all just as it came up. And I loved her closing line of, I don't think there's any drug that would make me get with my brother.
exactly. That's why I think that that's the pivot in the conversation because what Chloe had said to her earlier was that had kind of a three-way with the two brothers. Or
Right.
she just said I got with both of the brothers.
Right.
So then when she goes, I've never been in a three-way, that's when Chelsea's like, really? Like, what are you talking about? Like just last night. So she's aware of that. But then when it's like you got a hand job from your brother,
Yes.
she's like, what? Oh God. I was so confused in the opening scene of the show. I thought he was pleasuring himself while they were, and I was like, oh, he didn't have sex at all. And then it was only later that I realized what was actually happening. And I'm like, oh my God, does this show actually have to go here? I
Yeah.
I don't understand. I'm still not a huge fan of this plot line, obviously. I don't think anyone really is. I also have to say that in this episode, which I really liked a lot, and even with the dynamic of the Saxon character, all of this, I feel like taking it to this extreme, it's the one thing that just doesn't fit with the rest of the show, to be honest. What purpose does it serve to do this?
That's, I think that's my question that I came away with. Well, first of all, right, I don't like this storyline.
Right,
So I'm starting from a place of bias, but what purpose is it serving?
right,
I think so much of White Lotus, and we've talked about this before, is showing us characters that we identify with ourselves or that we have known people like that. These kind of universally human experiences and feelings.
right.
I feel like, and maybe I'm making a broad generalization based on my personal experience and as an only child, I feel like this is not a universal
No,
experience
I'm pretty sure it is not universal
that
experience.
everyone has either felt themselves or heard about or witnessed. So I guess I don't really understand what its place is in this type of story.
And especially taking it to the extreme. When I read the scene early on as not as explicit as it was, that would be interesting, the dynamic. Lachlan is the one who hooks up. He's the one on the outside, is ends up having to pleasure himself. And then you can think to yourself, well, what about this scenario is turning him on? So maybe there is some subtext to it. By all of that explicitness of it, I'm like, what does that
Yeah.
add to any of this? I don't understand. I really don't.
We had previously discussed that maybe these are not full blood
Right.
related
Yeah.
siblings. I
Right.
think at this point I have accepted that they must be.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't think there's any circumstance where I like this storyline, but I would
Exactly.
have liked it more
Right.
or just
Right.
liked it less if they were step siblings.
Right.
And I think that we have seen explored in pop culture. I mean, Clueless, right? She ends up
Yep.
in a romantic relationship with her stepbrother. They have no blood relation to each other.
Right.
Cruel Intentions had kind of a similar thing going.
Both based on like books or writings from like a century earlier, right? So maybe it was more commonplace back in the
Yeah.
day.
Harder to get out and meet people.
True. True. It's a very small
So
pool.
it would have felt more palatable to me or understandable to me if they were not blood relations of each other.
Right.
But here it almost feels like it's partly done for shock value, and
Right.
this doesn't
Yes.
seem like a show that needs shock value. So
Right.
I guess I'm just not getting it.
No, I feel exactly the same way. In where everything else seems natural, even the most outlandish part of these people are con men and possibly hitmen or whatever their shady past may be. There are certain types that you see in TV shows all the time. It still feels grounded in a way that this storyline just does not feel grounded, even in the context of the family. If the family was so dysfunctional that this would be only just another aspect of it, it's just a very odd storyline. And even thematically in the context of the show, I'm not sure what it adds. I really don't. If it was subtext, some mutual admiration for each other, some aspects of each other, like he admires his younger brother for being himself, and he admires his older brother for being the stereotypical male that maybe the dad would admire more. So there could be these aspects of themselves that they lack, so they see in each other, and then that leads to some kind of confusion in their relationship. Making it explicit doesn't add anything for me to the material. I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it pays off. I mean, this is really late in the game for them to make this thing pay off for me anyway.
My takeaway from the whole thing was just kind of asking why. Why
Right.
did we need this? What are we supposed to be taking from it? Why is this necessary? I'm back to my first questions, I guess, in
Right.
just other words. I don't really get it, is the point.
I also find the confusing how to read this, especially when you see the featurette at the end with the actual actors are talking about it. Because my read of it early on in the episode was that Saxon had some recollection of this, but wasn't sure if it actually happened or not. And that's why he throws up when he thinks it may have happened, or maybe just some fantasy in his mind, which either way is disturbing to him. And then that I also had assumed that Lachlan did remember, but was playing like I don't remember. But then we find out later on that when he's having the conversation, Saxon is having the conversation with the girls, that when they say, well, this happened, he goes, no, it didn't. And then they confirm it actually did happen. Then it's like it hits him again because he realizes that the thing he thought had happened had explicitly happened. And then Lachlan, during meditation, has the memory come back. Like we literally hear the monk telling them to let the memory in and then
Mhm.
push it aside. When he says let the memory in, he remembers the night before, and he also looks extremely disturbed by the revelation. Okay, so they didn't figure it out until later somehow. And then the added confusion is in seeing them be interviewed later on. The actor who plays Lachlan, is it making it sound like he knew the whole entire time? But I'm like, that's not true because you have that whole scene where he has the revelation in during meditation. I don't. I think that they're a little confused as to what exactly what everybody knew at what time, except for Chloe. Chloe was not inebriated or not enough to have blocked out any part of it.
Well, she literally says, I did not black out.
Right.
But as far as the other two saying they did black out, for me, with the title of the episode being
Sure.
Denials,
Mm-hmm.
I assumed that it was kind of, I'm going to say I blacked out. You're going to say you blacked out. We're all going to agree we blacked out, but nobody really did completely black it out.
Right. Right. Very rarely in my life have I drank enough or done anything enough to be blacked out. But I remember like that moment in front of the mirror, brushing my teeth the next morning when all of a sudden the memory comes back and you're like, oh no, I just remembered something about last night. So maybe that's what's happening there for them as well. Okay, and lastly, let's talk about Rick. I think maybe my favorite character on the show still, even though he gets relatively little screen time, but always so memorable. Walton Goggins, who's such a great actor. I've just been catching up on the Gemstones. The what's that name of that show? The
The Righteous
Righteous
Gemstones?
Gemstones.
I've never watched it.
I've just been catching up because season 4 just started, and I'm wrapping up season 3, which I never finished. I got almost to the end of season 3. I didn't make it to the finale, so now I'm catching up on it again. He plays their uncle in there, and he is so hysterically funny on that show. So it's like I was just thinking about him on The Shield, and then on Justified, and now on the Righteous Gemstones. Those are like 3 iconic TV characters.
None of which I have seen, but I
None of
take
them
your
you've
word for
seen.
it.
He's really extraordinary in all 3
I
of those,
love him here. He's great here.
as usual. But I loved the suspense and the tension. I like that he has this skeezy Colin Farrell in Miami Vice look going for him, but like it's working for him now. Like sometimes he looked just disheveled, and like when he's got that suit on the rumpled suit on the boat, it's like working for him now.
Mhm.
The tension that's building in these final scenes, and he's arriving there. The security guards are there. You know, of course, we've seen the security guards. He's there with Frank yet again. My heart was pumping. I can't wait to see this confrontation next week.
Yeah, and the return of Sam Rockwell here. I
Of
wasn't
course.
sure if he
Yeah.
was going to be a one episode character or not.
He's concerned. When he say, you're going to kill this guy, aren't you?
I liked the agreement to leave the gun behind when he tries to say, You're going to kill him. No, I'm not. Then why did you have me give you a gun?
Right. Exactly.
Saying exactly what the audience is thinking. Do you think he actually did leave the gun behind?
I'm pretty sure he didn't because I saw the scenes from next week.
Oh, I missed that. I missed that. Okay.
By the way, some of the things we see in the scenes from next week, now that we've opened the door for this liminal space of the fantasy, maybe some of the things we see are not actually happening next week. But I have a
True.
feeling they
Good point.
probably are. So I do think the gun makes an appearance next week. And that's where they leave things for the week.
I did really enjoy the scenery there, and the idea of taking a boat to somebody's house was really
Yeah,
lovely.
beautiful, right? What do you think about his meeting with her in town, saying like, "Oh, we really need to meet with you at your house,"
I
and she's
mean,
like, "And why exactly did you tell me to come here?"
yeah, none of it made any sense. I
Right.
did not feel like he was a convincing liar, which is interesting because I would think that character would be a good liar. She went for it, so mission accomplished.
That is where Walton Goggins is doing the best work because there is as if he has completely misplayed his hand and then he's able to charm her again. And I was like, oh, that's well done. Well done. Because, yeah, for a minute there, I'm like, what is he saying? Like, this doesn't make any sense. He's going to blow it. And
Yeah,
then he's able to, finagle it so that he wins her back over and even makes it sound believable, somewhat believable. The fact that he doesn't know what movie this guy's
right.
produced seems a
Exactly.
little preposterous. She should be asking more questions. Then again, she may not know whatever he came up with. She might be confused. She may not even know that what he's talking about in the first place. He could have just made something up. But to your point, that he should have done a little research and at least made up a movie that makes some sense, or just shout out some somewhat popular films that maybe she's heard of but aren't giant blockbusters, so that he seems like he knows what he's talking about. But he seems to have not done any research before he started this whole process.
Yeah, when it seems like something that is so essential for you to put your plan into action, yeah, you would think you would have done a little more legwork.
Yeah, and that's where we leave it for next week. So, what happens in Bangkok with Rick? I honestly have no idea how that's going to play out. I have my theory that this is actually Rick's dad and not Rick's dad's killer. That's my personal theory. We'll see if that pans out or not. Of course, what's going to happen at the mansion when everybody gets
Hmm.
together at Greg's house, Greg Gary's house?
Do you think Belinda will go?
I think she will. She invited her son, and I think that he's interested in it. She'll might feel a little bit better if she has some company. So yes, I do think she's going to go. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with the girls. Oh, the girls are going to
Muay Thai.
Muay Thai competition the next week.
Hmm.
I wonder, and Guy Talk's been invited to this as well. I have a suspicion that he is going to see one of the guys whose face he saw during the robbery. He may very well have a gun with him at the time, so that could escalate. He'll be there with Mook. And yeah, Tim will be deciding which members of his family to kill and which ones to leave at the monastery. Yeah, and I think that is where we're at for the show, with just two more episodes to go. Very exciting.
I always think the penultimate episode is the best of the season as a general rule. So let's see.
I think for the White Lotus, the final episodes have been culmination points in both cases. But this show has been, I think, a little outside the pattern of the previous two seasons. I mean, I guess we only have three to compare, so they've all been a little different from each other. So it remains to be seen. Yeah, and later this week, check the feed for the next episode. Darren and I will be discussing the first two episodes of The Studio, the new Apple TV Plus Seth Rogen comedy, and talking about Dope Thief also, which very entertaining, by the way. Saw the first three episodes, very entertaining so far. Short season, so we're almost halfway through already. And lastly, give us your feedback. Need some introduction at gmail.com or respond to us in the comments on YouTube if you're following us there. Thanks again for the conversation, Sona.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.